Joan Baez, a name that once rang through the hearts of millions, was more than just a musician. She was a symbol of change, a voice that stood for justice and peace. Her music became the soundtrack of an entire generation, especially in the 60s and 70s, when protests and movements for civil rights, anti-war sentiments, and social change were at their peak. Her voice wasn't just beautiful, it carried a message of hope, resilience, and the longing for a better world. However, over the years something changed. Joan, who once filled stadiums with her songs, slowly began to step back from the spotlight. For years, fans followed her every move, eagerly waiting for her next album or performance. But as time passed, those moments became fewer and fewer. Fans were left wondering what had happened to the woman they had admired for so long. What had caused her to fade from the public eye? In the early years of her career, Joan was everywhere. She was not just a folk singer, she was an activist. Her music was a powerful tool in the civil rights movement and the anti-Vietnam War protests. Her performances were often seen as a rallying cry for those who felt voiceless. Songs like Diamonds and Rust and The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down weren't just hits, they were anthems. Joan's presence in the music world was undeniable, and her influence stretched far beyond the stage. Yet despite all of this, Joan eventually found herself stepping back. It wasn't an overnight decision, but over time she distanced herself from the fame and the public attention that had once been her world. Fans had grown accustomed to seeing Joan on stage, always ready with a guitar and a new song that spoke to the heart of the times. But as the years went on, the tours became less frequent. Interviews and public appearances started to fade away. Where was Joan Baez? What followed this gradual retreat from the spotlight is something that has left many of her fans heartbroken. Joan didn't simply disappear from the public eye, she seemed to choose a life of solitude and privacy. Many found it difficult to understand why someone who had once been so active and engaged with the world would decide to leave it behind. Was she tired? Had the pressures of fame become too much to handle? Or was there something deeper at play, something that fans couldn't see? For many, the silence was unsettling. It wasn't just the absence of Joan on stage that left people wondering, it was the fact that the woman who had once been the face of activism, the voice of a generation, had seemingly vanished from the public narrative. Some even questioned if her decision was a reflection of how the world had changed around her. Had the causes she fought for, the issues she cared about, lost their relevance in a new, fast-paced and often indifferent world? As time went on, the mystery of Joan Baez's life became even more poignant. Fans who had followed her for decades wanted to know what had happened to the vibrant woman who had once stood at the front lines of protests. They longed to hear her sing again, to see her on stage with the same passion she had once shown. But instead, what they discovered was a woman who was embracing a much quieter life. What made this even more heartbreaking was the fact that Joan's impact on the world had never faded. Her music continued to inspire people, her messages continued to resonate, but her presence in the public sphere had become nearly non-existent. Fans who had once turned to her for guidance and inspiration were left with questions. They wondered about her health, her happiness, and what had led her to this life of seclusion. Joan's absence was not just a loss of a celebrity but of a symbol of hope, of standing up for what is right, and of using one's voice to create change. The curiosity around Joan Baez's life today is more than just a fascination with a celebrity, it's about understanding the woman behind the music. What is life like for her now? What does she do on a day-to-day basis? Fans who had once followed her every move were left to imagine what her life looked like today. They wondered if she still kept in touch with her old friends from the music world, or if she had entirely removed herself from that world. Did she still believe in the causes she once fought for? And most importantly, was she content with the life she had chosen? These questions, filled with both curiosity and sadness, continue to swirl around Joan Baez's life. Fans don't just want to know what happened to the singer, they want to know what happened to the woman who had given them so much of herself. They want to understand why someone who had once been so full of life, so passionate about changing the world, had retreated into such a private, solitary existence. For many, this absence is a bittersweet reminder of the passage of time. The world has changed, and so has Joan. The woman who once commanded attention with every note she sang now lives in quiet reflection, and while her fans continue to hold on to the memories of her music and her activism, they can't help but feel a deep sense of loss. Joan Baez's current life is a testament to the idea that sometimes, even the brightest stars need to step away from the stage. But for those who remember her impact, it's a sad realization that the world may never fully understand why she chose this path. Perhaps Joan's life today is a reflection of something more profound, that sometimes the most powerful acts of courage aren't performed on a stage but in the quiet moments of reflection and solitude. And so as the years go by, the mystery of Joan Baez's life today remains, a sad yet beautiful chapter in the story of a woman who once gave the world everything she had. Fans will always remember her as the voice of a generation, but now, they can only wonder what is life really like for Joan Baez now. Joan Baez's life has always been a mixture of brilliance and quietness. Once known for her powerful presence on stage and in protests, Joan slowly started fading from the public eye. Fans watched as she made fewer appearances, her albums became more rare, and her once active voice in social movements quieted. But what many people don't know is that she didn't just leave fame behind. She made a conscious choice to live a simpler, quieter life, one that many would find surprising given the fame she once had. In her early years, Joan was everywhere. She wasn't just a singer, she was a public figure who stood up for what she believed in. Whether it was civil rights, peace during the Vietnam War, or women's rights, Joan Baez was always at the front lines of movements. Her music was more than just songs, it was a tool for change. She didn't just sing for her fans, she sang for causes that mattered to her, to the world. People turned to Joan's voice when they needed inspiration, when they needed courage to stand up for what was right. But somewhere along the way, that fire seemed to dim. The public Joan, who used to be the voice for so many, slowly became more of a mystery. Fans started noticing that she wasn't touring as much, concerts became rare, and her albums became fewer. Her once regular interviews and appearances vanished. At first it wasn't clear what was going on. Was she retiring? Was she tired of the constant pressure of fame? Fans didn't know, and that's where the curiosity began. Joan wasn't someone who would just disappear without a reason. Those who had followed her for years couldn't help but wonder what happened to the woman who had once been at the center of the world's most important movements. Why was she choosing to step back? What was going on in her life that caused her to walk away from everything she had known? The mystery deepened when it became clear that Joan didn't just want to be out of the spotlight, she seemed to want to live a completely different life. A life that was far away from the cameras, the interviews, and the demands of her fans. Joan's decision to step away from public life was more than just a break. It was a complete shift in how she wanted to live her days. It wasn't just about getting tired of fame, it was about choosing a life of peace and quiet. This choice raised even more questions. What did Joan Baez do with her time now? What did her life look like when she wasn't performing or speaking out in public? Those who had followed her for decades couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to live as Joan Baez today. Was she still writing songs? Did she still care about the causes she once fought for? Or had time changed her, making her priorities shift completely? Fans felt a deep sense of sadness as they thought about Joan's life. They had watched her for years, and now to see her so far removed from the world that had once adored her was difficult to accept. It was hard to imagine Joan, who had once been a powerful voice for justice, living a quiet, private life without the same energy and passion that had made her famous. But the more fans thought about it, the more they realized that this shift wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe this was what Joan needed. Maybe this was her way of finding peace after a lifetime of public battles and constant pressure. Yet this didn't stop the curiosity. Fans who had once admired her from afar, now found themselves wanting to know everything about Joan's life today. Was she happy? Was she content with the life she had chosen? Did she ever look back at her years of fame and activism with regret? Or was she at peace with her decision to step away? These were the questions that lingered in the minds of so many people who had loved Joan Baez for years. Her absence made fans realize just how much they had taken for granted. They had grown used to seeing her in the spotlight, using her voice for the causes she believed in. But now that she was no longer there, it became clear that Joan's presence was something unique. Her music, her activism, and even her silence all held meaning. People started to wonder if perhaps her choice to step away from the public eye was itself a statement, one that said, "I've given enough. Now I choose peace." The more people thought about it, the more they understood that Joan's decision wasn't just about retiring. It was about living the life she wanted without the pressure of public expectation. For someone who had given so much to the world, it made sense that she might seek a quieter, more private existence. But for those who had loved her and followed her for years, it was hard to let go of the image of the passionate woman who had stood up for justice and change. Joan's decision to retreat from the public eye raised another question: how do we as fans deal with the disappearance of a public figure we once admired? How do we reconcile the image of the person we loved with the person they have become? Joan Baez was more than just a celebrity, she was a symbol of hope, change, and the power of music to create social change. Watching her step away from that role was a hard pill to swallow, not just because we missed her music, but because it felt like we were losing a piece of history. But even in her silence, Joan's legacy remained. Fans still held on to the music she had created, the memories of her powerful performances, and the causes she had stood for. Even though she may no longer be in the spotlight, her influence continued to shape the world in subtle ways. Joan Baez may have chosen to step away from the public eye, but her impact on the world was still there, lingering in the hearts of those who had once followed her. Her music would live on even if she no longer performed it on stage. In the end, Joan Baez's life today is a reminder that even the most famous figures need to find peace and solitude. While the world may have moved on, her legacy is still very much alive. Fans may never fully understand why Joan chose to live her life the way she has, but that doesn't take away from the fact that her music and her message continue to resonate with those who once believed in her. For now, the mystery of Joan Baez's life today remains, but it's a mystery wrapped in respect, admiration, and a deep sense of love for everything she has given the world. Joan Baez, the folk music icon, once had an undeniable presence in the world. She wasn't just a singer, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her music wasn't just melodies, it was a voice for change, a sound that carried the weight of social movements. Her songs inspired generations and her activism helped shape major historical moments. But today, her life looks completely different. The woman who once stood at the center of global causes now lives a life so quiet, so removed from the spotlight, that fans are left wondering what happened. Joan Baez's legacy as a singer and activist is undeniable. She became known for her powerful voice, her role in the civil rights movement, and her protests against the Vietnam War. Her music was an anthem for those who sought change and justice. But as time passed, the world saw Joan shift away from the public eye. She no longer seemed to seek the stage or the microphone. The question that kept lingering in the minds of many was why? What had made Joan Baez choose a life so different from the one she had once embraced? For years, Joan had been a central figure in the public's consciousness. Her songs were anthems for change, and her name was synonymous with activism. Her concerts brought people together, and her voice spoke to the issues that mattered most. People loved her for the way she used her art to challenge the status quo, to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. But after decades of living in the public eye, something changed. Joan seemed to step back. Fans and critics alike noticed the absence of Joan's music, her performances, and her activism. It was as if she had vanished from the public narrative, leaving fans with a deep sense of loss and confusion. It wasn't just the absence of her music that sparked curiosity, it was the silence that followed. Joan Baez, the woman who had always spoken up for the underdog, the voice for the voiceless, was now living a life of near complete seclusion. She wasn't just out of the spotlight, she had chosen to leave it altogether. Her decision to step away from the public eye wasn't a one-time event. It was a gradual process that made many fans question what had happened to the woman they had once admired so much. What had caused her to make such a dramatic shift in her life? For many people, this sudden silence was difficult to understand. Joan had always been vocal about her beliefs, and her music had always been a reflection of the times. She wasn't just a passive observer in the world of politics and social justice, she was an active participant. Her music and her activism were inseparable. Joan wasn't just singing for the sake of it, she was using her platform to challenge societal issues. When she began to step back, fans were left wondering if she had lost interest in the causes she had once championed. Had she grown disillusioned with the world she had fought so hard to change? It was hard for fans to imagine Joan Baez, the woman who had stood at the front lines of so many movements, suddenly disappearing into the background. They had known her as someone who would always speak out, always fight for what was right. And yet the woman who had once been a symbol of hope and resistance had chosen to retreat from the world. Her decision to step away from the public eye raised even more questions. Was she giving up? Had she lost faith in the movements she had once supported? Or was there something deeper at play? The curiosity around Joan Baez's life today has only grown with time. Fans continue to wonder what her life is like now. Is she still writing songs? Is she still involved in the causes she once cared so deeply about? Or has she completely withdrawn from the world of activism? Has she found peace in her quiet life? Or is she still searching for something? These are the questions that linger in the minds of her fans. They are no longer just interested in her music, they want to know about the person she has become. They want to understand why she chose to leave everything behind, why she chose to live a life so different from the one she had once led. As the years go by, the mystery of Joan Baez's current life continues to grow. She is a woman who once stood as a beacon of hope, a symbol of change and activism, and now she is living a life that seems almost completely disconnected from the world that made her famous. Fans are left wondering, what does Joan Baez's world look like now? Is she still fighting for the causes she once believed in, or has she turned away from it all? One of the most striking things about Joan's decision to step away is how different her life is compared to the image people have of her. When fans think of Joan Baez, they think of the woman with the guitar, singing for the oppressed and the marginalized. They think of the woman who stood up to power, who used her platform to challenge authority and injustice. But now, Joan is living a life that is the complete opposite of that. She is no longer at the forefront of social movements. She is no longer the voice of the protests. She has chosen a life of silence, a life away from the spotlight. This shift is not just a personal choice, it is a reminder that even the most passionate advocates need a break from the world they have fought to change. And yet this new life of Joan Baez is not without its own form of power. There is something deeply profound about someone who has given so much of themselves to the world, and who now chooses to live for themselves. Joan's life today might not be filled with public speeches or concerts, but it is a life that reflects a deep sense of self-awareness. She has given everything she could to the world, and now she is choosing to find peace in a quieter existence. While this might be difficult for fans to accept, there is a sense of beauty in it. Perhaps this is the most powerful message of all, that even in silence there is strength. For fans, the sadness of Joan Baez's life today isn't just about missing her music or her activism. It is about the realization that the woman they once admired so much has moved on to a different phase in her life. The curiosity around her life isn't just about what she is doing now, it's about what she has left behind. Joan Baez's decision to retreat from the public eye is a reminder that even the most influential people need space to breathe, to grow, and to find peace. Her fans may never fully understand why she made the choices she did, but one thing is clear: Joan Baez's impact on the world will never be forgotten, no matter how quiet her life has become. Joan Baez was never just a singer. She was a voice of the people, a powerful symbol of change and resistance. From the moment she stepped onto the stage, she became more than just an entertainer. She became a spokesperson for social justice, civil rights, and anti-war movements. Her music wasn't just about melody, it was about the message. Joan Baez used her platform to speak out on issues that mattered, and in doing so she inspired generations of fans and activists. But today, she isn't the same public figure that people once knew. Fans who followed her for decades now find themselves asking, where did she go? Why did she disappear from the spotlight? In the past, Joan Baez was a constant presence in the public eye. Whether it was performing at concerts, participating in protests, or speaking out against war and injustice, she was everywhere. People admired her not only for her voice, but for her courage to stand up for what she believed in. She was more than just an artist, she was a symbol of hope and resistance. But as time went on, something changed. Joan slowly began to withdraw from the limelight. Her music became less frequent, her performances rarer, and her public appearances almost non-existent. Fans were left puzzled, wondering what had happened to the Joan Baez they had known and loved. At first it seemed like a temporary break. After all, every artist needs rest, right? But as the years went on, it became clear that Joan was no longer interested in the fame and attention that had once been a part of her everyday life. She seemed to have made a choice to step away from the very thing that had defined her for so long. It wasn't just that she was retiring or taking a break, it was that she was disappearing, leaving her fans behind with only memories of her powerful voice and her past activism. But why? For fans who had watched Joan Baez rise to fame in the 60s and 70s, it was hard to believe that someone who had been such a central figure in the fight for social change could simply fade away. What had happened to Joan? Why did she walk away from everything she had worked so hard to achieve? Fans weren't just confused, they were heartbroken. Joan wasn't just an entertainer to them, she was a symbol of strength, resilience, and standing up for what was right. To see her retreat from the public eye left many people feeling like they had lost a part of themselves. But what was the real reason behind her decision to live a quieter life? The mystery deepened when it became clear that Joan wasn't just stepping back from the spotlight, she was choosing a life of complete privacy and solitude. It wasn't just that she wasn't performing anymore, she had stopped sharing her life with the public altogether. Her social media presence became almost non-existent, and she no longer appeared at events or gave interviews. This silence only added to the sense of confusion. Fans who had followed Joan for years now found themselves wondering about her personal life. Was she happy? Was she okay? Did she still believe in the causes she had once fought for? As the years went by, the curiosity surrounding Joan Baez's life today only grew. Fans who had once been used to seeing her on stage wanted to know what she was doing now. Had she retired from music altogether? Was she living a peaceful life, far away from the world she had once known? Or was there more to the story than met the eye? The questions never seemed to stop, and every time a new article or interview surfaced, fans would hold their breath, hoping for a glimpse of the woman who had once been their hero. But even as curiosity about Joan's life continued to grow, one thing became clear: Joan Baez was no longer interested in being a public figure. She had chosen to live a private life, away from the cameras and the pressure of public expectations. For someone who had spent so many years in the spotlight, this decision seemed almost impossible to understand. But perhaps that was the point. Joan didn't want to be understood in the way she had once been. She didn't want to be the symbol that people had made her into. She wanted to be something else, a person who could live her life on her own terms, without the constant gaze of the public. And yet this decision to retreat into a quieter life raised even more questions. Fans who had admired Joan for her activism and her music couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. Did she miss the stage? Did she miss being the voice of change? Or had she moved on from those causes entirely? Was she still involved in any form of activism, or had she completely distanced herself from the world that had once defined her? For many, this was the hardest part of Joan Baez's disappearance. It wasn't just that she had stopped performing or stopped speaking out, it was the fact that she had left a gap in the world of activism and music. Her voice had once been so powerful, so important, and now it seemed silent. Fans were left wondering if the world had lost something in Joan's retreat, if the causes she had once fought for had lost their most powerful advocate. But even as these questions lingered, something became clear: Joan Baez had made a conscious decision to step away from the world of fame and activism. This wasn't something that had happened by accident. Joan had chosen this life. She had chosen silence, peace, and solitude. And while that decision might have been difficult for fans to understand, it was also a reminder that even the most influential people need to step back and find peace. Sometimes the most powerful thing someone can do is to walk away from the very thing that made them famous. Joan's decision to live a life away from the spotlight also raised another question: what does it mean to be a public figure in the first place? Joan had spent so much of her life trying to use her platform to make the world a better place. She had used her music and her voice to stand up for what was right, to challenge the system, and to inspire people to take action. But now she was living a life that didn't require her to be anything more than herself. In a way, Joan's retreat from the public eye was a statement in itself. It was a reminder that even the most iconic figures need time to rest, to heal, and to rediscover who they are, without the pressure of public expectation. Fans may never fully understand why Joan Baez made the choices she did. They may never know what drove her to step away from the stage and the activism that had once defined her. But one thing is certain: Joan's impact on the world will never fade. Her music, her message, and her legacy live on in the hearts of the people she inspired. Even if Joan Baez is no longer in the spotlight, her influence continues to shape the world in ways that no one can fully measure. Joan's decision to step back may have been hard for her fans to accept, but it is also a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing someone can do is to find peace, even if it means walking away from everything they once knew. Joan Baez was once a household name. Her powerful voice and tireless activism made her a symbol of change. For decades, she wasn't just a singer, she was a leader, a voice for the voiceless, and a constant presence in the fight for justice. Joan's music wasn't just entertainment, it was a powerful tool for social change, but somewhere along the way, she decided to step out of the public eye. Fans who had once adored her were left with a question: why did Joan Baez choose to live a life so different from the one she had once known? The world knew Joan Baez as someone who was always in the spotlight. From the 1960s onward, her music inspired movements and her voice was heard at protests around the world. She wasn't just performing on stage, she was standing up for civil rights, opposing the Vietnam War, and speaking out for the most vulnerable people in society. For fans, Joan was a symbol of strength, courage, and resistance. She wasn't afraid to speak out against injustice, and her songs were the soundtrack of many of the most important social movements in history. But as the years passed, Joan slowly withdrew from the public eye. The concerts became fewer, the interviews less frequent, and her presence at social movements almost non-existent. For those who had admired her, this change was hard to understand. It wasn't that they didn't want Joan to have a break. Everyone knew that after years of constant pressure, someone like Joan might need to step away. But the way she faded from the spotlight made people wonder, was she done with music? Had she lost her passion for activism? Did she no longer care about the causes she had once fought for so fiercely? These were the questions that kept fans up at night. Joan had always been such a constant figure in the world. She had spent so much of her life standing up for others, using her music to create change, and then without warning, she was gone. The curiosity surrounding her absence grew over time. What had happened to the woman who had once been the face of so many important movements? Where was Joan Baez now, and why had she disappeared? For years, people speculated about the reasons for Joan's silence. Was she tired? Had the pressure of fame and activism finally taken its toll? Did she need a break from the constant demands of the public? Or was there something more to the story? Fans didn't know, and every time they searched for updates on her life, they were met with silence. The mystery only deepened. One thing that became clear over time was that Joan wasn't just stepping away from the stage, she was choosing a completely different life. While many famous people retreat for a while and then return, Joan seemed to have made a permanent choice. She wasn't interested in the fame or the recognition anymore. She wanted a life away from the public eye, a life that was quiet, peaceful, and free from the pressures of being constantly in the spotlight. This decision was hard to understand for fans who had grown used to seeing Joan at the forefront of change. But at the same time, there was a sense that this might be what Joan had always needed, a chance to be herself without the weight of expectations. But even as fans respected Joan's decision to step away, they couldn't help but feel sad. The woman who had once been the voice of a generation, the one who had inspired so many people to stand up for justice, was no longer there. There was a sense of loss, not just because of the music, but because of the absence of the strong, powerful voice that had always stood for what was right. Joan had been more than just a singer to her fans, she had been a hero, someone they could look up to for guidance and strength. As time went on, the curiosity surrounding Joan Baez only grew. People still wondered, what was she doing now? Was she still writing songs? Was she still passionate about the causes she had once fought for? Or had she completely moved on? Fans wanted to know what her life looked like behind closed doors. They wanted to understand why she had made the choice to live such a quiet, private life. This curiosity wasn't just about missing her music or her activism, it was about missing the person they had once known. Joan Baez had been so present in their lives for so long, and now she was gone. The absence of her voice left a gap, not just in music but in the world of activism. Joan had been someone who never hesitated to speak out. She had used her platform to challenge the status quo, to stand up against injustice, and to fight for the powerless. But now she was silent. Was she still fighting for justice in her own way? Or had the world changed so much that she no longer felt the need to raise her voice? These were the questions that lingered in the minds of those who had once followed Joan. They wanted to understand what had driven her to step away from the very movements she had helped to build. Over time, it became clear that Joan Baez's decision to retreat from public life wasn't a decision made lightly. She had given so much of herself to the world, and now she wanted something different. She wanted peace, quiet, and the chance to live life on her own terms. And while fans might not have understood her choice, there was a sense that they could respect it. After all, Joan had earned the right to live life the way she saw fit. But even as Joan chose to live her life in seclusion, her legacy didn't fade. People still talked about her music, still listened to her songs, and still remembered the impact she had on the world. Her voice may not have been heard in public anymore, but her message lived on. Joan Baez may have stepped away from the spotlight, but the work she had done in the past continued to inspire others. In some ways, Joan's retreat was a reminder that everyone, no matter how famous or influential, needs time for themselves. Everyone needs space to breathe, to rest, and to find their own peace. Joan's decision to step away from the public eye wasn't just about retiring from music or activism, it was about taking care of herself, about finding balance in a world that had once demanded so much from her. The sadness fans felt wasn't just about the loss of her music, it was about the loss of the person they had admired for so long. Joan Baez had been a hero to many, someone who had always stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. To see her